The wind cuts low across the ground, pulling the last warmth off the skin. Out in a blizzard, nothing stays steady. Heat drops fast. Breath disappears. Most people would shut the door and pray the fire holds. They did not. Native families watched the wind the way others watched the sky. They read the smoke. They followed its tilt. Because wind can steal heat in seconds, but it can also guide it if you know how it moves. And smoke thin and slow tells you exactly where the air's going. On nights when the storm tried to take everything, they did not run from the wind or the smoke. They used both. That is how they stayed warm when the world turned white. Stay by the fire. The wind drags low across the ground, the kind that steals warmth before you even feel it leaving. Out on the Great Plains, a blizzard does not fall. It crawls. It moves sideways, scraping the snow across the earth like a blade. If your shelter faces that wind head on, the cold will take your fire in minutes. That is the truth of this land. The Lakota knew that long before anyone wrote it down. They watched how the wind behaved at ground level, not up in the sky. Right where the teepee stood, a straight-facing entrance was a mistake. The wind would rush in, hit the fire, and pull the heat out through the roof. So they turned the doorway. Not much, just 20 to 30 degrees off the main wind line. A small shift that made a big difference. When you angle the entrance like that, the back of the teepee becomes a natural shield. The wind hits it first splits and slides along both sides. It never charges straight inside. And the fire, sitting low and steady, keeps its heat. It is wind deflection in the simplest form. A line, a tilt, and a little patience. I have seen nights where that choice was the only thing standing between warm air and freezing breath. When the wood was running out and the fire was weaker than it should be, that angle kept the warmth low to the ground. It kept the cold from ripping through the doorway. It kept people alive. Today, every bushcrafter who camps in open country knows this rule. Face the door wrong, and the night owns you. Face it right, and the wind works for you, not against you. A small angle, a simple turn. But on blizzard nights, that is survival. Stay by the fire. On blizzard nights, the smoke never rises clean. It hangs low. It spreads under the roof. And if you let it sit there, it will choke the air before the cold even gets to you. That is why the people watch the smoke the way they watch the fire. Because smoke tells you what the wind is doing inside the teepee. Not outside, inside. When the smoke starts to sink, the wind has shifted. When it drifts sideways, the flaps are wrong. A teepee breathes through those flaps, and if the breath is blocked, nothing inside stays warm. The Lakota learned to work with the wind, not fight it. They opened the flap on the side the wind pushed away from. They closed the flap on the side the wind hit. Just enough to tilt the air. Just enough to guide the smoke up the way it wants to go. Do that right, and the smoke forms a clean path. It rises slow. It leaves the fire alone. It keeps the air open so people can breathe without coughing through the night. I have seen a whole teepee change with one move of a pole. Shift the flap and the smoke lifts. Shift it wrong and the room fills up like a bad chimney. That is how sensitive the air is in a storm. We do the same thing today when we adjust a wood stovepipe. Too tight and the smoke floods the room. Too loose and the fire loses its draft. Same logic, different tools. Inside a teepee, the wind is not the enemy. You just have to show it where to go. Stay by the fire. The cold takes from the ground first. Always. The frozen dirt pulls the warmth right out of your legs before you even notice. A weak fire cannot fight that kind of loss. That is why the people paid attention to the lowest air in the teepee, not the air near the roof, the air around their feet. They learned something simple. Warm smoke that sinks does not smother the fire. It creates a thin cushion of heat, a low layer that keeps the cold from crawling up your body. To make that layer, they shaped the ground itself. They dug a shallow ring around the fire pit, nothing deep, just enough to guide the smoke down and around. Then they placed hot stones along the edge of that ring. The stones held the warmth. The smoke wrapped around them, and together they made a slow-moving circle of warm air, a quiet little current, a natural convection loop that never needed more wood. When you slept near it, your feet stayed warm. Your hips held their heat. The ground stopped pulling the warmth away. That was the whole point. Keep the body warm from the bottom up. I have seen nights when that low smoke layer made the difference between comfort and shaking through the dark. It is old knowledge, but it works. Even the Earth Lodge homes use the same idea. Their smoke holes were set slightly off-center, not a mistake, a design. It kept the airflow turning in a steady loop. Warm air down low, cold air pushed out. This is heating without burning more wood. This is how you stay warm when the cold owns the ground. Stay by the fire. When the fire is dying and the wood pile is almost gone, the body becomes the last source of heat. Your breath, your skin, your own warm air. That is all you have left. But a big space loses that warmth fast. The wind finds every gap. It pulls the heat off your breath before it even settles. The people knew that, so they used the one thing that stayed longer than flame: thin smoke. A light, warm moisture that hangs low when the fire burns slow. To make that smoke, they kept the flames small. More coals, less fire. Coals give steady heat without kicking the smoke too high. The smoke spreads softly, forming a thin layer that holds the warmth close. When your breath rises into that warm layer, it does not vanish. It stays. It mixes with the heat from the coals. Together, they make a stable pocket of warm air, and the wind cannot steal it. I have seen nights where that pocket was the only thing keeping people from shaking through the dark. No extra wood, no roaring flames, just human heat held in place by a little smoke and a bed of coals. Keeping your breath is keeping your warmth. That is the rule out there, the same rule that makes a sleeping bag work. You trap the warm air you make. You do not let it escape. Inside a teepee, it is the same. You guide the smoke. You calm the fire. You let the coals speak. And when the storm outside is pushing hard, that quiet heat is enough to fight it back. Stay by the fire. In hard wind, the cold hits the skin first. It pulls the heat straight off the surface. Without thick fur, the wind wins fast. The people knew that, so they looked for another kind of protection. Not thicker hides, not bigger fires. Smoke. A thin layer that settles on leather and seals it tight. When you hang a hide near the top of a teepee, the smoke is heavier there. It clings to the surface. It sinks into the pores of the leather, slowly, evenly. And when you take the hide back down, it feels different, denser, less open to the wind. Hun the outside just enough, and the leather forms a barrier. The wind hits it, and the heat does not bleed out. It is the closest thing they had to a modern windproof jacket, made with nothing more than time smoke and patience. I have seen storms where that smoke layer kept someone warm long after the fire dimmed. No magic, no special tools, just a hide treated the right way. Because a little smoke can turn an ordinary coat into a shield. Bushcrafters still do this today. They hang their leather gear in the smoke of a slow fire. They let it settle in. They know it works. A thin coat of smoke. That is all it is. But when the wind is cutting hard and the night is colder than it should be, that small layer can keep one more degree of warmth where it belongs. On your skin. Stay by the fire. In a blizzard, no one sleeps alone. Spread out, and the cold takes you piece by piece. Heat scattered is heat lost. The people understood that. So they built warmth the same way they built shelter, with shape, with order, with bodies placed exactly where they needed to be. They formed a curve around the fire, not a loose circle, a tight arc with purpose. Adults on the outside, children in the center. Every head turned the same direction away from the incoming wind. That shape mattered. The wind hits the backs first and slides off. It never reaches the middle, and the smoke light in low drifts across the faces, giving just enough warmth to keep the skin from freezing. When you lie in that formation, your heat does not float away. It collects. It stacks. One person's warmth becomes part of the next. Piece by piece, the group becomes a single warm mass. I have seen nights where that arc of bodies held more heat than the fire itself. Not because the fire was strong, but because the people were close enough to keep the warmth from escaping. This is not just a way of sleeping. It is physics, precise body placement, shared air, shared heat. A human insulation system built long before the term ever existed. Survival schools teach the same thing today. They call it the shared heat circle. Same logic, same science, just a different time. In a storm like that, warmth is geometry. You shape it with wind. You hold it with smoke. You protect it with people. Stay by the fire. In a blizzard, the wind never stays honest. It shifts. It cuts from a new angle without warning. And inside a teepee, that change can kill the fire faster than the cold itself. If the new wind hits the smoke hole head on, the draft collapses. The flame chokes. The smoke sinks. And the whole room fills in seconds. The people learn to watch the smoke, not the wind. Because smoke moves first. Before you feel the draft, before you hear the flap shake, the line of smoke will lean. Just a little, but enough to warn you. That lean is the signal. It means the wind has turned and the house needs to turn with it. At night, someone always stayed awake for that reason. Their job was simple. Eyes on the smoke. When it tilts, they grab the pole and shift the flap. Open one side, close the other. Guide the wind back into the path that keeps the draft alive. Do it right, and the teepee stays clear. The fire keeps its breath. No one coughs in the dark. No one wakes up choking on smoke. I have seen teepees survive storms this way, not because the fire was strong, but because the people listened to the smoke. It is more than heat. It is the language of the house. A soft voice telling you what the wind is planning. We still read smoke today. Campers check the lean of a campfire to judge pressure. Hunters watch it to know when the weather is turning. Different world, same sign. Inside a storm, silence is not empty. Sometimes it is the smoke speaking first. Stay by the fire. And the word. We spend our lives trying to stay away from wind and smoke. Out here, those two things kept people alive. That is the difference. Most of us see wind as a threat and smoke as trouble. They saw them as tools. More than that, they saw them as information. They learned how the wind moves at ground level, how it steals heat, how it shifts without warning. And they learned how smoke reacts first, how it tilts, how it rises, how it sinks. Every movement meant something. None of this added weight to the teepee. No extra wood, no extra blankets, no bigger fire. Just knowledge. Knowledge that sits in your head and keeps you alive when the temperature drops farther than it should. I have seen nights when they had almost nothing left to burn. The fire was small, the walls were cold, but the air inside still held its shape because they knew how to read it. They knew when to open a flap, when to close it, when to shift the stones, when to move the bodies closer. All small decisions, all invisible to most people, but that is how they kept the warmth from slipping away. Not with muscle, not with force, with attention, with a feel for the air that you only get from living close to it. It's wisdom that weighs nothing. It fits in your pocket. You can carry it anywhere. And on the worst nights, the nights that take everything, that kind of wisdom is worth more than firewood. Stay by the fire. When the storm is at its worst, the fire drops to a small red line on the ground, but the teepee stays warm because the wind and the smoke were set in place long before the night turned hard. The wind lifts the breath. The smoke holds the warmth low. Even with almost no wood left, the air inside keeps its shape. That is how they made it through nights most people would never face. Not with bigger fires, but with knowing how the air moves. Stay by the fire.